Okay, so welcome everyone here at the symposium What is Circus? It is organized by Studium Generale and Festival Circolo. That's the circus festival which is based here in Tilburg. You'll hear more about it later. My name is Annelieke Koster and I'm a program manager at Studium Generale. And I'm your host for today. So it's about contemporary circus. Most people think of the traditional circus when you hear that word. And that is the circus with clowns, animal acts, acrobats, and such. And the contemporary circus is something else, or something that evolved from the traditional circus. We'll hear more about it today from our experts that are here. We have 2 presentations and then a small interview and then the Q&A that I already talked about. And the first talk is by Cedric Stalpers, and he is a circus enthusiast and a lecturer here at the Department of Psychology in Tilburg. And I believe, Cedric, that you will introduce yourself and your fascination with the circus a bit further. Yeah, so floor is yours.
My name is Cedric. I'm going to share with you the findings of my research into the circus during the last 10-15 years. First, a brief bit about me. What are my perceptions of the circus? I'm an audience member as well. In my younger years, the circus was omnipresent. It appeared in movies, comic books. My dad was a great circus enthusiast. You see him here on the right-hand side, buying tickets for Ballyween Circus. But over the years, quite a lot of things have changed. The last time a circus appeared as the background of a James Bond movie was here in 1983. My dad was a big circus enthusiast. He passed away, unfortunately, 8 years ago. And the circus we visited that day, he was buying the tickets over there, is Ballyween, and Ballyween is no longer performing frequently in the Netherlands. So quite a lot has changed, especially during the last 10 years. Why do I like the circus? Well, Morgan Freeman, with that great voice of his, once expressed it very eloquently. It's the magic of risking everything for a dream nobody sees but you. When the first time I attended a performance by the Circus Academy in Tilburg, here at the bottom left-hand side, I was overwhelmed by the talent of the young circus artists performing there. And in a way, I wanted to give something back to them in return. And hopefully the research I do contributes to something to their career. And yeah, it's, I think, sometimes a difficult career because in general, musicians, circus artists, actors are not the most well-paid people in the Netherlands, although they give a lot of talent and motivation back to their audience, and their shows mean a lot to their audience. I want to share a few questions with you. I will keep it brief, don't worry. I won't take up 2 hours of your time and end up with the entire lecture hall here asleep. I save that for other events. I'm sharing with you research from the last 10, 12 years, including a recent study I did to dust off a bit of the main findings. I especially zoomed in on younger audiences like you, students. And the questions I want to share today is, what are the images people have in mind when I talk about the circus? Annelieke already told me, yeah, you got 2 types of circus, the old-fashioned one with the clowns and acrobats, and the more modern one, which is more artistic and no longer has animals and clowns. And does that converge also with multiple audience segments? Is it one homogeneous audience, or are we talking about 2 different types of audience? And does the circus still connect with the younger audience, or is it a bit like, yeah, the generation of my dad? He was an avid circus goer, and is the circus a bit perhaps of the past? People who grew up with circus, a lot of them are no longer with us. Well, I asked my students, a young generation, what do you think when I talk to you about the circus? I didn't tell them anything else. I didn't show them a clip. I merely told them, circus, what brings to mind? And a lot of people at Circolo, the organizers and people from the Circus Academy, hope that their modern nouveau cirque is dominant in the audience's mind. Unfortunately, it's not, and not by a long stretch. If I talk to people about the circus, what comes to mind? The old-fashioned image, the clowns, the acrobats, the animals. Some of them even mentioned topics like controversial, cruelty to animals. So if I talk to people about the circus, even a very young generation, so people in their late teens, early 20s, the image that pops to mind is the old-fashioned circus, the circus that my dad visited frequently. Yeah, and here it says on the slide, yeah, words appear like lions, elephants, and tigers. Yeah, you can rest assured they are no longer performing in the circus. So if you think there's still a debate going on whether elephants and tigers should perform in the circus, well, that ship has sailed. Whether you like it or not, I don't think those type of acts will return. Well, nearly sure of it. I want to show you a clip of a different type of circus, and if technique helps me out, I want to ask you whether this is the type of circus you have in mind when I mention the word circus. Is this the same what you had in mind when I talk about circus? Is this the type of prototypical circus you are thinking of when I mention the word circus? Is it prototypical? Is it new? Is it different? Who says this is really the type of circus I had in mind? Why not? Well, like you said, sorry?
No tent?
No tent. Other things that are missing, perhaps? No animals? Other things missing? It's indeed a modern type of circus. It's somewhere in between the old-fashioned classical one, because it's still very accessible. It has music you can recognize, but all kind of older elements of the classical circus, like indeed the big top, the old-fashioned clowns with the large shoes, the elephants and tigers have completely disappeared. We asked the general audience, what do you think of when I talk about a circus? And an overlarge majority reacted a bit like you. They think about the classical circus. And this is from a market research 2 years ago amongst a general audience, and only a very small group thought of the modern circus, nouveau cirque, I prefer the word nouveau cirque, when, like I just showed you, no clowns, no tigers, no lions. It turned out that we also have two circus segments. It's not one big homogeneous audience. You got, in a way, three segments. People who don't go to the circus, they exist. I don't know them. I like to keep it that way. You got the classical crowd, which is slightly older. In cultural sociology, we call this crowd middlebrow or lowbrow, in the sense that for this type of circus, you may not need a lot of, so to speak, cultural training and education to understand what's going on. They also haven't been to university or University of Applied Sciences. Most of them have got what we call in the Netherlands MBO. So they're not the highest segment on the educational ladder, and they're slightly older. And if you ask them, what do you visit? They say, well, we like to go to the classical circus, the modern, not that sure about. A lot of them say, well, it exists, yeah, we know it's there, but it's not really our cup of tea. The second group, which I simply called the Nouveau Cirque group, is a bit more tolerant. They say, okay, we know two types of circus exist, and we visit both types. We like the old-fashioned one with the clowns and the animals and the horses, and that attracts also parents with young children, but we also very much like the Nouveau type, and we maybe even prefer the Nouveau group. And that group is much higher educated. Nearly 2 out of 3 of these audience segment members have been to the university or University of Applied Sciences. They're slightly younger, and like I said, what often happens with the regular crowd for cultural events, they visit both the more, so to speak, elitist and complex art, and sometimes also the more popular, so to speak, lowbrow or middlebrow, more accessible type of art and cultural events. We asked both audience segments, and of course the third segment, the segment that doesn't go to the circus, what's your image of both the classical circus, the clowns and the elephants, and the Nouveau circus, the ones we just saw in the clip without the elephants and the clowns? Well, in blue you can see when we talk about the classical circus, people know what to expect. They think, well, it's accessible to children, not only to grown-ups. I will think I like it, but it's a bit old hat, but I can easily understand it. In red, you see the image of the Nouveau Cirque, and yeah, that's quite different. People don't know what to expect. The old-fashioned one, I know what I will get. I will see a clown who gets a pie thrown in its face. With Nouveau Cirque, I don't know what to expect, and sometimes I don't really understand it either. It's also a bit more expensive. A lot of people, when they talk about Nouveau, think of Cirque du Soleil, and Cirque du Soleil is quite expensive. And I think it's much more for grown-ups, not only for children, but also for an older crowd. And the Nouveau Cirque, like the name implies, doesn't have the bit old-fashioned, old hat type of image the circuses like Hermann Renz, Renz Berlin, Bellywien used to have. Oh, my slide have changed a bit in order. We also asked the younger age group, have you been to the circus? And I was afraid that a lot of students never went to the circus and have never even seen one inside. But fortunately, the overlarge majority, the bar in the middle, has once visited a circus. These percentages used to be a bit higher when it comes to the answer category yes, especially 10 years ago, but I think COVID messed up the circus industry, and of course the ban on performances with animals and lions and tigers and what have you, have also made it much more difficult to attend an old-fashioned circus nowadays. So we used to have Hermann Renz, it folded. We used to have Circus Renaissance. It folded. A lot of old-fashioned circuses have folded during the last 10 years. We asked a younger age group, what do you think of the circus? Is it still entertaining? Will you like it? Or do you think it's boring? Well, I asked it to my students, and here it says 84. The bar is based on 97 students. The overlarge majority still thinks the circus is boring. I was afraid that the circus was only appealing to people like my father and my generation, but also younger generations still think, okay, the circus is nice, I would like to visit one. We did ask, and this is a question from an older older market research, what would you like to change if you were to own a circus, run a circus, be a ringleader in a circus, if you were to organize a circus? And people were quite creative here in this market research. It was 10 years ago, a few years before the ban on animal acts, and the remark that most frequently was made had to do with the performance. People really wanted to change the performances. No longer these old-fashioned clowns, work on the pace, don't wait for applause to continue for a long time, improve lighting, improve the acrobats, more trapeze acts. People were highly creative. Modernize your show, modernize your marketing. Well, at the middle of this slide you can see a poster that was really used by a circus 10 years ago, Circus Renaissance. Great performance, but the marketing was quite, well, if you didn't have a fear of clown, the poster would instill it in you. I think Stephen King may have written it after seeing this poster. And yeah, that was those were the clouds appearing on the horizon. A lot of people made remarks back then about the animals. Get rid of the tigers and the elephants, or different group, take much better care of them. Well, nowadays these remarks are no longer applicable because, yeah, the animals and the tigers have left the circus, and I don't think they will ever come back again. Improve the appearance of the tent. Well, in a few years' time, in a few weeks' time, we will have Circolo here in the city, and I can all warmly recommend going there. But don't wear your best shoes. That's what some people remarked about the old-fashioned circus as well. The whole appearance of the big top could be improved a bit, and in general improve the image of the circus. I'm wrapping up. The classical old-fashioned circus is encountering many difficulties, has encountered many difficulties. A lot of old-fashioned circuses are no longer performing, and you can no longer see many shows with clowns, with acrobats, especially with clowns and many animal acts. And those clown and animal acts already 10 years ago were not that incredibly popular. Although people still like acrobatic acts and still think, also a younger generation, the classical circus is interesting. But it still needs much modernization, both from a marketing as from more artistic point of view. And although, of course, I greatly admire and enjoy both the Circus Academy and Circolo, I do have to note that in the general public's mind, the classical circus is still dominant, is still at the top of people's mind. And Nouveau is, of course, great and entertaining, and you should all go to Circolo, but it has not filled the gap yet that is left by a lot of classical circuses folding after the ban on animal acts. It's attracting mainly a higher educated and a slightly younger crowd that's also a bit more tolerant of diverse art forms. So the classical group doesn't go to a modern circus, but the other way around. There's a lot more interaction. And one of the issues the modern circus may need to deal with is people fearing, I won't understand what's being shown on the stage, shows may be too complex, and I don't know what to expect in advance. And for those students here, if you want to write a thesis about a circus or perhaps about another art form, it may be interesting to conduct, for example, a Delphi study, which implies interviewing several experts in depth about both the show, the marketing, and the lobby, because circuses, in a way, need to interact and deal with politicians and governments if they want to survive. And what happened 10 years ago to a lot of classical circuses is also part of their lobby not being effective enough in convincing the politicians they need to hand an umbrella to those traveling shows. And if you want to write a thesis about a different art form, of course, that's very good too. You can use the same method as well. I want to ask you, are there any questions about what I have just shared with you?
There are a lot of different types. Thank you. Yeah, I was wondering if in the studies that you showed, you also asked people if they were viewing content of circuses, because there's also a lot of recorded performances, and I feel like people, especially during or after COVID, might watch more performances like DVDs or on Netflix or stuff that's posted online rather than really go to a circus themselves.
We didn't ask that one yet. No. It's a good suggestion, but we didn't pick up on it. I do have to admit, being there in a live show with the scents and the popcorn, that brings something extra you can never recreate on DVD. But we don't know that after COVID or during COVID, perhaps recordings may have substituted the lack of a real live performance. So it's a good suggestion, but I cannot answer it.
So we got an insight in the audience, the circus audience, and also an insight in what has changed a bit in circus land, as we say. Now I'll give the floor to Lucia Smith, who is the artistic director of Festival Circolo, and you'll tell more about the circus nowadays, the circus you bring in the festival, I guess, and your view on circus as such. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I have a bit of a cold, so I hope you can understand me. Also, I'm not really used to doing these kind of presentations like this. So I have a notebook. I have no PowerPoint presentation. But I might skip back to some of the slides, with your permission, Cedric, that you just used to tell a little bit more about that. So I will introduce myself. I will talk briefly about Festival Circolo, which I'm now artistic leader of. And then, in light of what we just heard, I thought it may be interesting to go a little bit more into, yes, the evolution of the circus, and then maybe more content-wise, go a bit into that, and we'll see where we end up. So forgive me if it's not so super structured, but yeah, there we go. Lucio, that's my name. I'm from Holland originally. I was born in Rotterdam. I started out with a youth circus way back when I was a child. After high school, I was very much into physics, and I wasn't sure, so I took a year off. And with two of my friends, we went hitchhiking through Europe, and I discovered that there was a circus school in France, and I was overwhelmed. These things didn't exist back then. And I applied, and by miracle I got in. So I studied there. It's 5 years, and then I founded my company there that I still have. I make performances with them. I organize events, and we have a social project in the region that we are based. And I still live in France, actually. Yeah. Last year, I had the opportunity to come back, connect a little bit more with the Netherlands. by taking over from Wendy, who was my predecessor at Festival Circolo, a festival I've performed at during my career. So this was a great opportunity. I applied, and by miracle, again, I got the job. So now I'm artistic leader. What does that mean? I get to decide what's on display, the general mood, atmosphere, performances, the themes that are present in the performances, and so on. That's about me, that's about Festival Circolo. Maybe it'd be nice just to give you an impression of last year. In one of the slides I saw improved marketing come on, and we worked together with a very nice team of people that are in marketing, and they made an after movie, so just you can have an impression. Wow. Looks very impressive. Of course, this is for marketing purposes. It's very short. You only get very brief snippets of... it doesn't actually say what the performances are about or what you can experience. It's 100% visual spectacle. So Festival Circolo is a yearly festival. It's a 10-day festival that takes place in October every year. So it's just around the corner. We have the mission to support and accompany young makers from the Netherlands. There are 2 academies in the Netherlands, which is quite a lot. If you consider there's 9 professional circus schools in Europe and 2 of which are in Holland, especially considering the cultural climate that we can experience here. So we accompany young makers. We give a bit of an overview of what's currently happening in the contemporary circus scene in Europe. So a lot of companies that are based in France and in Belgium, every now and then some from Germany, Italy, more and more from Spain and especially Catalonia, where a lot of things are happening right now. I trust you will discover the program at a later stage. So, moving on. Yes, maybe we talk a little bit more about what we can expect and what we can see from the circus. I will show something first. Sorry if this is unexpected. Huh? Merci. Okay. I think I will go down first. All right. So, what did we just see? And does it correspond, or does it connect to what we see in here? Maybe there's a clown element in it somehow. Excitement, yes. Bravery. Do you see that somewhere? Yeah. Oh, great. A performance. Okay, great. There's an entertainment element to it. Yeah. Why not? I used to be. yeah. I was referring to myself. Okay, in a way it does, but then on the other hand, it doesn't really. It's not really the kind of image that you would have from that you would associate with circus, especially given the context. Maybe also, there's no costume, there's no music, there's no what's there to give it a bit more than just this performance. As Cedric already pointed out, maybe today there can be a second form of circus, which was referred to as nouveau cirque, and I can agree to this. I would like to introduce maybe a third form of circus. Maybe that is that I would call contemporary circus more than nouveau cirque. Nouveau cirque is, of course, the French term, something that started happening maybe 35 years ago, with Cirque du Soleil as an example that we're all more or less familiar with, I think. And then today, contemporary circus, which is a translation of cirque contemporain in French, but then they would also call it cirque de création, so creation circus, something like this today. It's still a bit different, and I think I would like to point out a little bit why and how from the other two. So, traditional circus, nouveau cirque, and contemporary circus as a third option, maybe, as a third category. What do they have in common? They have a lot of these words in common. Clowns and animals, even if it's not wild animals, are still very present in contemporary nouveau cirque and in traditional circus. Acts with dogs or camels or things like domesticated animals are allowed and possible, and are sometimes referred to as well, or done as a reference to the tradition in contemporary circus. They would have in common maybe the circular performance space, whereas more and more today you have very frontal settings in circus performances. During the festival you may discover a performance, for example, in the Schouwburg, or also in the Nieuwe Vorst there will be performances, which of course makes for a very different reading and a very different experience. There has always been, and there still is, something inherently queer or odd about all these circus practices, where in maybe the traditional circus you can think of everything that was odd or weird, the Siamese twins, or the bearded lady, or things like this that would be really put on display, today there's still very much this sense of community, of being the odd one out, of being, putting on display or magnifying your differences or your identity, basically, a sense of community, a sense of identity that has survived also through all these different things, I would say. And of course, there's a whole lot of techniques related to circus that we still have in common, as in acrobatics, as in object manipulation, as in, yes, all these things that you can imagine, trapeze, and all these elements that are recurrent in all the different circus forms. What's really different, I would argue, are a couple of things. I would like to insist the most on the on the evolution of the dramaturgy, of what's really being told with these performances. Where in the traditional circus, what was very much a display of prowess and force and agility and skill. You can read this or see this as the superiority of humanity over nature, literally taming the animals that are wild, or defying the law of gravity by doing a somersault and landing on your feet. You know, it's to demonstrate the perfection of man and its capacity to dominate the forces of nature. It's moved away a little bit from that with the Nouveau Cirque, where often, of course, okay, now there are no more animals, but still the demonstration of skill is very central to the narrative. You can think of Cirque du Soleil again. It's a good example of this, as wherein you can imagine a performance where a child falls asleep, and in his dream world, he or she encounters the most exotic creatures that do all sorts of incredible, magical, and poetic things. And then you have still a succession of acts that throughout the performance, where skill is still very much central, and there's music and there's light, and you can imagine that it's still something that goes a bit over this, but in the end, without without being, how do you say this? With respect, I think in this kind of setting, the narrative is more a pretext to show skill rather than actually telling a story. And then with contemporary circus, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, you have to admit. The skills, or all these different techniques that I cited earlier, they can be put to use to express something else, to express something maybe that you cannot express with words, like, for example, in a dance performance. They serve the narrative. They are a means to express something else. How does that work? Well, maybe we can go back to the 3 chairs, for example. What could this possibly tell you about anything? If you imagine a performance themed about, I don't know, it could be really anything. The aging body. Would this be a metaphor of something, or maybe something about something very easy, like climate change? Could this be a metaphor of the world being at the brink of collapse? Maybe something about anything, really. You can read a lot of different things into this. So this technique or this tool can be a means of expression for something else, but you have to frame it differently, of course. Maybe I would even be required to speak. Also something that happens more and more in contemporary circus is frontal settings and speaking and borrowing from dance and theater and all these other stage performing arts. There's an element of the tragic hero. What's no longer at display is the mastery of man over nature, but maybe more the struggles of the person, of the artist, to overcome his own limits. And that's actually beautiful to see. We've moved a bit towards these tragic heroes. Maybe Sisyphus would be a good example of this, where he rolls his boulder always up the mountain, it rolls down the other side. It's an eternal struggle. He will never reach his goal, but it's okay because it's beautiful to look at. And it can give us a sense of, we can relate to this as an audience in respect to our everyday struggles. If, for example, I would have put another chair on it, and then another one, and then another one, and another one. Of course, you can read the performance, but also where are we going with this? It's ever ending. So this could literally be the myth of Sisyphus. Okay. The differences between the three circuses can also be found maybe in their different ways of transmission. As in traditional circus, it was very family transmission from literally within the family. The father and the mother teach to their children and so on. With Nouveau Cirque, most of the performers are from this is true maybe 15, 20 years ago. It changes a little bit today. Former gymnasts, for example, people with very little artistic or creative background, but with high physical capabilities and skill that are directed or that are put to use sort of in these kind of performances. And today, of course, there's circus schools, which is a very different form of learning and acquiring the background and the skill. The economic model. Of course, in traditional circus, I would argue, I don't have the statistics, but the overwhelming majority are for-profit businesses. In the Nouveau Cirque as well, and in the contemporary circus, I don't have the statistics, but the overwhelming majority is non-for-profit. There's independent workers that have their own person company, which of course is for-profit in that sense. But as soon as people organize themselves in a company, it's no longer the case. It's also a sector where, that cannot survive without the help or the support of all different kinds of funding. I think I can, I think I've said most of it. We'll have more time to exchange later, I suppose, during the Q&A. Maybe one quick question, and then we can move on, maybe. Go ahead, please. What is the process of organizing a whole show as in compared to a dance or a film production, for example, or a theater production? I don't have the knowledge of film production, but I can say for a contemporary circus production, different models exist throughout Europe. In the Netherlands, before you set a foot in the studio to work on your production, you basically have the funding secured. Whereas in other countries, and I think of Belgium and France, you go along, you find some money, you can work a little bit, and you interest more partners that can either co-produce you or support you or host you for another residency, and you continue like this. And at one point you have an opportunity maybe to do the premiere, and then you go on from this. It's a more organic process, if this is what you're referring to. Maybe more the creative side? Yes. That's a very long question to answer, but I can say that As an artist, as a maker myself, I usually start with something the order of an intuition, or something I feel I want to speak about or raise awareness or share with the audience. And from there, I translate it into what I can do or what I can see technically with what I can do. For example, I can climb on 3 chairs. So, okay, how can I relate this to my practice with chairs or balancing in general or whatever? From there, depends if I do this alone or if I do this with a lot of people. How do you share your idea with others? How do you talk about it? How do you formulate it? You write a lot. I write a lot. You end up with some kind of file or a dossier with who, what, when, and where. But this is really the hardest part of the whole creation, as in you want to express something that, with circus or with your technique, because also it's hard to put into words. Otherwise, I would write a book maybe about it.
Okay, thank you very much, Lucio, for your insights in circus and in your circus life also a bit. I would now like to invite Alice Davis to the stage, and we'll have a short talk about her starting career in circus, right? Alice, you're a recent graduate of Fontes, the Circus Academy here in Tilburg. As I said, you're starting your circus career, and I'm really pleased that you're here to share your personal story, your insights in circus nowadays, and I believe you are the best person to introduce yourself more, so go ahead.
Try. Hello, I'm Alice. I'm 25. I'm from London, and yes, I graduated from the Circus Academy at Fontes University in June this year, so I'm really just starting out. And I'm a trapeze artist, and I will just sort of briefly tell you how I got to here. I started doing trapeze when I was 8 years old. It was really a childhood hobby, a playful activity that I did once a week to meet new friends, to, develop motor skills, to learn group dynamics, but mostly it was just very fun to do. And I carried on into my teenage years, and everyone knows the teenage years are quite a complex time, and in that time circus began to hold more meaning for me. It was a way to escape from the pressures of daily life, issues at school, social anxieties, also a way to connect with my body during adolescence, which we all know is quite a tumultuous time. And then I reached the end of my school years. I was incredibly interested in literature and fine art, so arts in general. I've always been a creative person, not to blow my own trumpet, but it's true. And I was thinking, what to do. Should I go to university? I did a really last-minute audition for a preparatory circus school in Madrid. So it's a 2-year physical training program. And I got accepted, and I was so overwhelmed by how romantic it seemed that I didn't think too much, and I just went at the age of 19. And previously I'd never done anything so physically intense in my life. And so those 2 years were quite complex. For me, I found a huge contradiction in circus as a practice. On the one hand, so exciting, so warm, so welcoming, so wholesome in the way it relies on trust, support. It stimulates growth, it stimulates self-awareness, it loves, what Lucia was saying, the queer, the weird, the wonderful. But at the same time, I found a lot of darkness in Circus's underlying themes of constantly pushing boundaries and constantly pushing for the extreme. And, you overhear comments and attitudes towards the body, towards the diet, towards pain, physical pain. There's some thrill in suffering in circus artists. People would show off bruises at the end of a training session with pride, which can be dangerous if you think about it. And unfortunately, at the same time, I was struggling a bit with my mental health. So I ended up resonating quite strongly with this darker side of circus. But I carried on. The urge was still in me. And I came to Tilburg to start at Fontes. And I had a rough first 2 years of my course. But the urge carried on, and eventually this led me to start researching sustainability in circus practice. And it started off very much self-centered. I was looking into mental health, I was looking into body image, relationships with pain. But I started getting really inspired, and I started trying to tackle the expectations and standards of performing bodies in general, how change and variety is such an important part of circus, and how this can shed light on all of its darker areas. I started looking at representation on stage, the need for a greater variety of bodies in terms of age, physical capability, past experiences, past traumas, all of these things. And over the last 2 years, this research has shaped my practice, my physical work, my performances. I also write about circus. And now I am, with all of this kind of accumulated knowledge, I'm making my first ever solo show. So it's very exciting. It's all very new. So yeah, that's just kind of how I got to here.
It's already a lot of information, I guess. No, thanks for that. I briefly showed one of the pictures of what you're working on, right? There's another one here. You have your own show already, or you're still working on it?
Well, the first showing is in less than 2 weeks, so let's hope that I've got it already.
At Circolo, I guess, or yeah.
Yeah, at Circolo, yeah.
And is that does it have a theme, or is it a what is it about?
Well, it comes from my practice, so of course it touches all of the things I mentioned. It's about change.
Or is that the wrong question to ask?
No,
is it just something you have to see?
No, it's a great question. I mean, I'm happy to talk about it. I also would recommend seeing it. I can tell you, briefly, but I do really appreciate the freedom of the interpretation. But it's a show about, all of the things I discussed that I'm passionate about. It touches mental health. It touches how physical or previous experiences continue to influence us today, both in body and in mind, and how this is connected. It's about subjective experience, the individual experience in comparison to the surroundings. But mostly it's, I really want it to be open for interpretation. That's really important to me. So we see what the people think.
And if I hear that, I think, there is a lot to tell. What would your perfect audience be, or what would they, if they leave, what would their feeling be, or I don't know. You understand my question? Yeah.
Perfect audience. I don't like the word perfect.
Of course.
Any audience, everyone is welcome. I do not want to. It sort of touches a bit on what we were speaking about before about nouveau cirque or contemporary cirque feeling inaccessible or too complex. and I do not want to intellectualize my work. I mean, I do write, I do talk, I do think a lot, but I don't pretend that anyone else should have to. So for me, primarily, circus is a feeling, and everyone can feel. Whether you can put that into words or not, it's up to you how you want to express your life, but it's a feeling, so every audience is welcome, and the best thing that could happen to me after doing a show is that someone in the audience shares a feeling with me. That's it, actually.
When Lucio here did his act with the chairs, I felt a bit uncomfortable because maybe you had it as well. I see people nodding because we were all thinking, oh my God, nothing's secured here, and is it working? Is that a feeling that audience has a lot during this contemporary circus events, or is it, or during your show?
I think discomfort's a really interesting one. I also had it too, but in what you just did, Lucio, there was this crippling thing of we're in a very real situation right now. There's no lighting, there's no music, there's no nothing. There was no preparation, he just took the chairs and started doing it. And so you're forced into this focus of this reality of like, what's gonna happen next? And this is beautiful because it brings everyone into the same second. And I think a lot of contemporary artists are interested in this, in playing with the comfort of the audience. Like that the audience goes to see Cirque du Soleil and you know you're going to sit back and you're going to see Risk and you're going to see this, but I just sit in my seat and it's amazing and blah, blah, blah. And I think there are people interested in these days making the audience's feeling in the moment sort of become a part of the performance. And discomfort is a really interesting to work with, I think. And in my work, I try to also achieve this. I look for spectacle not in kind of glorious climactic tricks, but instead in calm and intimacy. And I try to create a sense of focus in the audience and a sort of feeling of meditation. So there is some discomfort as well, I think, because what I'm doing is very real and very visceral, and it's always slightly different. But I like this because it's reflective of real life for me. Yeah.
Yeah, in the preparation you told me that it also takes a lot of strength from you, of course, the act you're doing, but you don't hide the discomfort or the pauses that you need to take to get yourself together again. And so in that way I think it's really different from the circus acts that I've seen when I was younger, where everything was with the music and I'm doing all things here, sorry. Let's get that to the right thing. Oh, sorry. Here we are. And I forget what I was saying. I'm sorry.
About taking the time.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really. I think that's also. I don't know if that's the same for all artists, but or for all contemporary. No, Lucius nodding. No, that's really something for you, because I was thinking that's really also different from the more traditional circus, right? So yeah. Hey, and you talked about the body representation in circus. You're a young circus artist, 25 you said, yeah? When you're 40, is your career over then?
This makes me really angry. So I hear...
I know.
Yeah, I asked her to ask me this also. I hear comments from friends of mine saying, I've got 10 years left in my body, and they're my age. And I say, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? And I understand also where it comes from, because, you know, physicality changes. and it does decline after a certain point. And you know, for instance, I always say the example, my parents are musicians, they're both 60, they still practice, they still work, and I want the same for myself, why would I not? But it's true that holding up a cello or sitting at the piano is less physically demanding than that. So it's possibly natural that, you know, my career would end sooner than theirs. But the thing is, there's so many reasons why this is stupid. Creativity doesn't decline, and actually, you know, it's quite a familiar phrase. There's freedom in restriction, and I think creativity actually enhances when you have less and less tools sometimes. And you know, this freedom in restriction and limitation, Circus is like the champion of finding limitations, creating limitations that don't exist, and then solving them, or finding new possibility within them. But we could also do that for the limitations that do exist. So a friend of mine said that Circus is not really about seeing extraordinary bodies anymore. It used to be about the, you know, the freaks, the bearded woman, the strong man, these caricatures. And these days it's about seeing an ordinary body do extraordinary things. And for me, any ordinary body is, you know, from the day you're born with whatever physical condition you're born in until the day that you pass away. And the only reason I can think of that in Circus we don't cater for our natural limitations is because we're sending a message about the kinds of bodies that we want to see on stage. So, you know, the young, fit, capable bodies that, you know, I have right now, these are desirable, these are valid and relevant experiences, and so we want to see them. So if we continue to cut our careers at 30, 40, we're actually sending a really dangerous message. And also because Circus is the place where everyone can find new possibility. It's such an amazing art form for this. It's about the body, and I have this object. I'm sitting on it right now, but Lucio stacked 3 of them and he stood on top of it. It's the way that your body interacts with objects, with other people, with the world, and it's metaphorical of so many things. And if we continue to choose, you know, one type of body, then we're saying, you know, this is the only body that's relevant in the world. So yeah, I could talk for ages about this, but I stop now.
So thank you for those insights. I think we'll leave it at that for this moment, and we'll ask Lucio and Cedric to come up to join us for the Q&A. And you, audience, if you have any questions for any of them, feel free to do so. We asked in advance some people to ask questions, and one of them was just, how do you become a circus performer? Is there a recipe for any of you? You can share that, Mike. Yeah.
How do you become a circus performer?
Yeah.
No,
Tell us, please.
I don't think there is a recipe. I spoke of the maybe 3 different ways of, in the 3 different circuses that I identify, how you get to be part of the gang or the family. I see these 3, but there's probably many more. I can imagine someone learning by himself a set of skills and just perform. Yeah, maybe you have some.
Yes, I think there is no one way. It's one of the lesser defined careers. There are many options these days because we have professional circus schools and they didn't used to exist at all. But you don't need a bachelor education whatsoever and to be a circus performer. It's not relevant, you know, it's about, because we create our own process. I mean, I did a bachelor education, but I ended up leaving with a technique that I made up. It was influenced by amazing people that I met, so it's great for the community and for making connections and building a network and learning from other people, because you're in this space every day. But in terms of my practice, it's really mine. It wasn't taught to me specifically. And there are many amazing artists who learn on the streets since they were a child and just start performing, put a hat out and slowly grow from there. You know, there's a million different ways as there are people, I think.
Anyone else? Question?
Can I say something? It's not really a question, but Alice, I really liked what you said about the age of performance. I used to work at a dance company, and it was contemporary dance, and they had a few dancers who were over 40, but it wasn't the theme of any of the performances. They were just older, and I loved it so much. So I really like that you are also advocating for this, so I love it. It's not really a question.
No, but just to comment on that, I think it's in any case of where we find discrimination, because you could say it's a form of discrimination. At the beginning, sometimes we need a fight to say this show is about having these people of this different background on stage. But eventually we want to get to the point where it's just, that's exactly as you say, they're just older, you know.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And it isn't a thing.
Yeah. But it's happening in the there's a movement, I think. Yeah. I'm seeing more and more shows that are, you know, filling me with hope. So it's going somewhere good.
Another question that we got in advance was maybe Cedric, I don't know, maybe you can answer that. That was, how would you categorize contemporary circus? Is it more an entertainment form, like circus, the traditional circus, or more a form of art, a niche form of art like contemporary dance? Yeah.
I think it's more an art form. If you look at the audience, if you look at the fact that people say, hey, I think it's rather complex, I don't always understand it, I don't know what to expect in advance, I would say it's closer to a regular art form.
And is it then, is that also something that you would research? Because now you have those highbrow, lowbrow categories. Is there also like a category where you make a difference between entertainment and art, or
Yeah, I clearly in research, and when I also talk to people who work within the classical field, notice quite a strong distinction with people mainly in the classical field. They want to draw audiences, younger children, they want to keep the clowns on board. They don't want to listen to my research results. They do want to continue working with animals, and they're strongly focused on an entertainment with an entertainment mindset and entertainment goals. And there's quite a big gap between the two kinds of circus. It's sometimes really east and west. And I was also a bit hesitant to use in my own presentation and also in questionnaires the word contemporary circus, because it implies to the other side, to the classical circus, hey, you're old-fashioned, you're old hat, you're obsolete, your days have gone. And I know how people from the classical field think about it and feel about it, and I didn't want to step any tones in that respect.
I think there's a lot that connects the two, sort of this distinction. For one thing, amongst entertainment and art, the feeling is a common ground. Entertainment is about, you know, provoking feelings and escapism or joy or shock or wonder, and art is also a way of provoking feelings. And that's a huge connection. And I also think that the traditional circus says as much as the contemporary circus says about us as a society. So I really see this togetherness, and there are a lot of companies these days that are, as you mentioned, making references to the traditional in the contemporary. And so it's kind of, perhaps in the public mind, it seems in your research you found this distinction. But the way that I see it also is that everything is it's really cohesive. One came from the other, and they both tell huge amounts about us and our attitudes. And yeah, you want to add?
a question in the room?
I heard Cedric say, I'm a traditional performer. I'm from traditional circus. I've not been born there. But this distinction of contemporary circus and traditional circus and not wanting to listen to your research is partially because you forget that we have a culture and a tradition, and people are born into the industry. And this is where this balance goes wrong. This is where you start touching emotions that people have about their heritage. And in some cases, 7 generations. And I think that hurts for most. Not for me, though. Yeah. Let me be very clear.
Yeah, I get it. There's quite a lot of emotions around animal performances. The show sometimes needs changing. The marketing needing changing. And I was also a bit surprised nobody was biting my head off when it comes to the animal performances in the circus, because I know how many emotions are involved with that debate. So that was a bit of a surprise, but I can really relate to what you're telling me.
The reason I've never bit your head off, because that's when we met the first time, I was still working with tigers in Moscow State Circus, is we knew it was ending. We knew the discussion was not something we were going to win. Budgets for lobbying in the European Union were very different between us and the animal welfare lobby, or however you want to call it. So we knew we were not going to win. It was just stretching time, both to say goodbye to what has been part of our lives, and secondly, finding new ways to make circus work for us. And that takes time, especially if it's a generational thing.
Yeah, I understand. And one of my biggest desires, and I also hope somebody writes a master thesis about it, is that some way we'll find to build a bridge between the contemporary and the classical circus, and find some kind of new form which keeps both the good elements of the old one, so being accessible to all walks of life, not only people with university education, but also brings in new contemporary things and modernize the show. So I really like to see some kind of new type of circus being created. And yeah, if a student writes a thesis about it, I'm sure I will give him or her a very high grade for that.
Is something like that happening, Lucio, that you know of?
Not that I know of. No, I cannot think of anything, unfortunately. I really recognize this thing of this sense of identity and this sense of community that I maybe briefly touched upon earlier. That's very strong in circus, and that's something that survives from centuries back. Even though now there are two very distinct and very separate communities, there are these values related to solidarity, belonging, acceptance, everyone's welcome. These things, they still exist also in contemporary circus. If I'm still performing, making performances and involved with circus today, it's because of the people that do it very much. It's my opinion that circus is not something that you do, it's something that you are. So when there's comments or critique, or when it turns out the way you work, live, cannot continue at one point anymore, of course it touches it's really touching, yeah. And yeah, coming back to your question, are there things now that are no, I see referencing in the contemporary circus to the traditional circus, but yeah, I have the feeling that it's something that has gone in a different direction, really. Yeah.
Okay. Any other question from anyone? No. Now, then I think we end it here. Thank you very much, all three of you, Cedric, Lucio, and not Lucia, I made a mistake before, Alice, of course, for your yeah, interesting talks here and your insights in the circus nowadays. And for you all, thank you for being here. But for now, big hand for the three of them.